Hi, it's Allison, founder of the Inherent Worth Connection. I'm also a coach and facilitator. So it's been quite a few months since I've uploaded anything new to my YouTube channel. And sometimes the reason for that when I go away for a little bit is I just feel like I don't have anything to share sometimes, or I just am taking time to process and contemplate and just work through some things on my own that are for myself. So I wanted to come share something that I've been thinking about for a little bit, but really wasn't sure how to share it or express it, I guess. So, as if you watched some of my other videos, you know that I went to a Catholic school in elementary school. I also talked about why I created the Inherent Worth Connection. And I didn't specifically talk about the experience where there was really some communication that was hurtful and harmful, and people really weren't listening to each other and honoring each other's inherent worth in that conversation. And that conversation actually took place regarding the current church I'm a member of. So there's a whole lot of religious things in my past that I hadn't really thought about, and currently, like in my current life, that I hadn't really thought about how much of a connection for me inherent worth is around religion. And I thought I'd just pop in and talk about it a little bit. And the one thing that really has struck me um, as I've been processing this for myself is the whole idea of sin and inherent worth. Because again, I was raised Catholic. Um, I still am a member of a Christian church, a very much more progressive Christian church now. But the whole concept of sin in Christianity and how it relates to inherent worth has been something I've been kind of working through, processing, having some curiosity around, which I feel like is very much allowed in the current church that I attend, that maybe wasn't so, didn't feel as allowed when I was growing up in the Catholic Church. So just for a little background, again, I grew up born and raised Catholic, went to a Catholic elementary school. I had an impact in that Catholic school that really affected me, and I shared that in one of my previous videos. And whether that was, I'm sure that wasn't the teacher's intent to make me feel horrible and to help me kind of lead me to the identities and behaviors I chose to express after having that experience. But that's another thing, we could get into later about the whole thought of intent versus impact. We can go in with a certain intention, but we don't always know what the impact's going to be on the person that we're interacting with. So kind of a really interesting thing. We can't always control the impact, but we can always, once we figure out the impact and if we had an unintended impact or a harmful impact, how we can go and repair that relationship or that situation and make it, about their experience and not about our intention. So that's just a side note. So I want to tell you before I begin, I haven't been Catholic for many years. I haven't been a practicing Catholic for, I'm really most of my married life. So it's been over 20 years. And there are some things that I still appreciate from the Catholic religion that I still kind of hold as something as a good memory and something that I really love. Um, One is the whole idea of saints, which many other Christian denominations think that's one of the horrible things about Catholicism. For me, I think of saints being like ascended masters or people that have been in the human experience, but were maybe enlightened in some way, have figured out some things in their human experience that we could really learn from or get benefit from. So I like the idea of saints. I really love Gregorian chant, like the chanting of the monks, which seems really old and something that's very old and traditional in the Catholic Church. And there's something about it that's very meditative for me to listen to. I think it really reminds me a little bit of like mantra meditation, which is my favorite type of meditation. So just to say that, haven't been a Catholic in years. There's a few things that I still like about Catholicism, but there's many things that pulled me away from Catholicism. one of the things was when we got married in the Catholic Church, my husband and I did, and he was raised Methodist, and he felt very unwelcome in the Catholic Church during the whole marriage preparation experience, and actually during our wedding ceremony. The priest made it very, very, how do I say it? Very, very obvious that my husband was not Catholic, and it felt like almost he called him out. And he also was very unwelcoming towards my non-Catholic guests that were attending the wedding. So there's really a feeling of unwelcome, specifically for my husband. So we knew kind of right away that we were going to need to find something else, because of kind of that country club feel of the Catholic Church. And I know not every church is that way in the Catholic religion, but this particular priest in that particular situation, it didn't feel good. So I was not going to insist that he become Catholic and attend Catholic church if he didn't feel welcome. And then on the other end of that, not long after we got married, all the news came out about all the abuses that have been happening in the Catholic Church that have been covered up. And it's a very patriarchal religion as it is. So none of those things sat well with me. So it really made a lot of sense that we moved on. And like I said before, when I was growing up Catholic, I really didn't feel like there was much wiggle room to really be curious and question. And where I am now, I have, if you want to call it, I've been kind of in a deconstructing process, like deconstructing things I learned growing up Catholic, and even things that, I see in the new denomination that we attend, and things that I'm still like, oh, that doesn't really make sense to me. But I feel more allowed to be curious. So, what's kind of interesting is, like deconstructing in the religious sense, which I know people do that off and on, and there's quite a bit that you may see online now about people deconstructing religiously. That's also something that we do in coaching. It's kind of a re-examining. Um, it's really a re-examining your beliefs about yourself in coaching, and it's the same thing, a very similar thing when you're deconstructing a religion or anything else that you may be deconstructing. It's really looking at re-examining those beliefs and kind of back in track to why you believe that way, and if it serves you really. So again, the thing I wanted to really talk about today is kind of the whole concept of sin. So from my childhood, and I didn't know this at the time because I was an infant, but when I was baptized really young, so I know I was less than a month old. I actually may have been closer to like 2 weeks old. And part of that was because my grandmother was very, very scared that if I didn't get baptized and I died before I was baptized, that I would go to hell. And that was a common belief among that generation. Um, Honestly, I don't know if that's changed much in the Catholic religion or if there's quite that urgency the way there was when I was a baby. But my mom was not raised Catholic. My dad was. So my mom didn't really understand the urgency that my grandma felt, but it really stressed my grandmother out. So my mom was like, yeah, sure, we'll get her baptized. But I just thought, what a strange belief that an infant, a brand new baby just out in the world, could possibly go to hell for not being baptized. Like to me, as I got older, and kind of heard the stories, and it's not uncommon. Like I have other relatives I've talked to that same experience. But again, you think about a fresh new baby, and already they have sinned or have original sin in such a severe way that if they aren't like washed clean of that original sin, they're bound for hell just for being born. So that's a strange concept. So, and I understand, I am not an expert on religions. I always am very curious about other religions, but as I understand, there's some other like Christian denominations that you have until like you're 7 years old until you're really like responsible for your sins. So it's like you have a kind of a free I don't know, a free window for your first 7 years of life before you can do that significant of a sin that you would be bound for hell. And kind of interestingly, so I have some notes because I had like this whole journal thing that I'm like, I know what I want to talk about, but I had to get it down on paper. So interestingly enough, in the Catholic religion as well, when you reach, I think it was second grade, so when you reach about that 7-year-old point, you do, so there are sacraments in the Catholic religion, and at 7 is when you do reconciliation, and they call that actually the age of reason. So I guess in the Catholic religion, they feel the same way that that's kind of when you can actually be responsible for your sins. And if you don't know what reconciliation is, what that sacrament is, it is when you confess all of your sins to a priest. And then the priest gives you a penance to like absolve your sins. And I think back to the different experiences I had. It's like, so I would go into the confessional, like you could do it face to face with a priest, but a lot of times, and you'll see it in movies and things, there are two doors and you're like in a box and the priest's in one box and you're in another box and you're talking through a screen. Um, so like my experience is like going in there when I was young, it'd be like, oh, I was mean to my brother and sister, or I lied to my parents, or things like that. And then the priest would tell me, okay, say this many Our Fathers and this many Hail Marys and whatever. And so you go out and you sit in the pew and you say your prayers, and then it wipes the slate clean. It's like, okay, so you're good. And I think in a technical sense, you're supposed to do it pretty regularly. Um, Again, since my mom didn't grow up Catholic, she thought this was kind of an odd thing. Like, why wouldn't you just talk to God or say you're sorry to God? And to me, even more importantly, like, why don't you just go and repair your sin with the person you harmed? I mean, that feels just important to me, honestly. But since she wasn't raised Catholic, she actually converted to Catholicism later on, and she pushed back on the priest that she went through the catechism with and said, like, do I really have to do this? And the priest at the time was not the priest that married my husband and I, but the priest at the time was kind of like, it's okay. You don't have to do this if you don't feel comfortable with it, which was pretty unusual, I think, at the time. Um, that the priest was kind of open to her questions or being uncomfortable with that. So again, we didn't have to do that often, but I always thought that was such an interesting thing. So it's like you sin and then you go tell the priest, and then the priest tells you to say a few prayers or to do a few things. And that's like, yep, okay, now we can go back to zero again. Like the slate's wiped clean. But it's something again you're supposed to regularly do because like we're sinners, so we sin all the time. And then another piece of Catholicism, or the way I was raised, that was really interesting to me, it was the whole idea of purgatory. And so if you don't know what that is, so purgatory, and again, I'm not a scholar, I'm not an expert, but this is my experience of what purgatory is. Purgatory to me was if you died and you didn't get to like confess your last sins, or they do have another sacrament that's like last rites kind of thing. But like if you didn't get to do all that stuff and you didn't get absolved by a priest and you died, or maybe you forgot a few sins to confess to the priest, so you still have them just sitting there, you could hang out in purgatory, which isn't a great place. Like I think it's still very like hell-like, but it's temporary. It's almost like you were in timeout until you like got worked through whatever sins were left that you hadn't gotten forgiven or absolved from. So you'd hang out in purgatory and then eventually you get to go to heaven. So it's like, okay, that doesn't sound as scary. I still very like looking back, it's like, why would a baby ever go to hell still? Like, why wouldn't a baby just at least sit out in purgatory and let until, I don't know, maybe their parents prayed them into heaven? I don't even know. But in any case, um, that concept made me feel a little bit better. Like I wasn't as scared because like when you're growing up, at least in my opinion, when you're growing up in a Christian religion, and probably other religions too have this, but It's like the whole thought of death and the afterlife can be terrifying because if you think, wow, I better be perfect or I'm going to go to hell and burn for eternity, that is terrifying. Like it a nightmare inducing for kids. Like I know at some points in my life I would have a hard time falling asleep because like what if I died in my sleep? Like where am I going to end up? What's going to happen? So just like scary, but also the whole idea of sin is like did you ever have inherent worth if you were always a sinner? Because that act, like just the pure act of being human, when you grow up in a religion like that is a sin. So, again, like outside my being raised Catholic, I've always been super curious about other religions. Somewhat other Christian denominations, but there was a short time where I thought everybody was Catholic because I went to a Catholic school. I knew that not everybody went to a Catholic school. I knew there were other schools, but for some reason in my mind, and this would have been early elementary school, there were three Catholic churches in town. So I just figured, and there were several different mass times that you could go to. So I just figured like if I didn't see somebody at church, they were either went to the other church or went to a different time. Like I just didn't realize there was anything other than Catholicism for a little bit. Um, which is kind of silly, but whatever. But outside of that, yeah, I've always been curious about other religions. A lot of times I'm more interested in learning about non-Christian religions because part of what I like to see is like where the similarities are and where the differences are. And of course, I mean, I think most of us see if you look at other religions, there's a lot of similarities in like how you treat other people, loving your neighbor, that type of thing. Um, so when I got out of Catholic. I mean, when I got into later elementary school, I think it dawned on me that there were other religions, and that was probably when I was more in different activities and starting to connect outside of like my school peer group. And then when I went to middle school, it was a public school. So I was definitely exposed to other kids that weren't Catholic. And I started making friends with people who weren't Catholic too. Um, and I started getting invited at different points to, do sleepovers and whatever. And if it was happened to be a Saturday night and their families attended church, I would many times end up attending church with those people. And that that was really eye-opening. And that was also like another level of holy shit, I my inherent worth, like you're not worthy even though you're Catholic. So um this one particular church that I went to with my friend, um, remember one particular instance, like I had a tie-dyed shirt and it had a peace sign on it. And my friend's like, you cannot wear that shirt. Like my grandparents will freak. So for some reason, the peace sign was like a sign of the devil. I don't even know. Like I didn't really question, but I had to wear a different shirt, like even just around her grandparents, because the peace sign was not allowed. And in that friend's church, and then her grandparents are actually the ones that usually took her to church. So we would be like riding in the car with her grandparents and we parked. And I just distinctly remember her grandma turning around and say, like, basically, okay, we're going in here. And she was like telling me it was going to be different, but also like, I feel like she was almost kind of warning me, like, maybe don't tell them you're Catholic. Like, they're gonna look down on you because of that, or they're gonna like really wonder about you. So I kind of like didn't share that, kept it quiet, didn't volunteer that information. But I kept getting asked if I'd accepted Jesus into my heart. And I was like, well, have I? I would usually say no because that wasn't a thing you do in the Catholic Church. You don't say, I accept Jesus into my heart. Like you do the different sacraments and you grow through like your Catholic journey. It's almost like you beat different levels. So you get to go to the next sacrament or whatever. Um, but what was so interesting is, so I would say no because that wasn't a thing that we did. And so all these people were so worried about me. They thought I needed to be saved. And this happened not in just this church, but it happened in a couple other ones too. So I had some interesting experiences with going outside of my Catholic church. And these were more, I would say they were more like evangelical, more conservative type of churches. But that was always the question. Have you accepted Jesus into your heart? And I'm like, I suppose not technically, like not in the way that probably you would do it, the ceremony or the ritual you guys would do. Um, yeah, so I hadn't like it was very confusing. Um, because I felt like as a Catholic, like I was doing all the right things and I was, following Jesus in the way that like the Catholic Church prescribed, but then I was like, oh crap, am I really okay? Like, am I um worthy of heaven because I didn't do it the way that this other church prescribed? Um, and what's also interesting, so like and I may be wrong on this, but like I've heard different people talk about like when you accept Jesus into your heart, like that's it. Like you're done. You're saved by grace. So like works don't matter. And to me, I always thought that was so weird because it's like, okay, so you can go like murder somebody, but because you've accepted Jesus into your heart and you're saved by grace, like that's okay. You're still going to heaven. Like in the Catholic Church, like that'd be considered a mortal sin. So that's definitely putting you on the list for hell unless you do a heck of a lot of like repenting and like fixing the situation where it felt like in these other churches, it's like, yeah, whatever. Accept Jesus into your heart, and then you can sin as much as you want because you're like chosen. You're saved by grace, whatever. So another interesting story, and I know this is like probably gone super long, so thanks for hanging in with me. I just sometimes I ramble, and this is what happens. Um, so my husband, again, he was raised Methodist, so I was still Methodist is like kind of like in the middle ground, and not quite as conservative, but so when we lived in our one of our first houses, these couple young girls came up to the door and knocked on the door, and they were evangelizing the neighborhood. And my husband comes out and he's like just talking to them a minute, and like he felt kind of bad for them because they were young girls that were like forced out to go do this thing, and they had their Bible with them, whatever, and they're like, can we pray with you and have Jesus save you and Jesus will be in your heart, whatever. And my husband actually said to them, so it's like, so I can sin as much as I want now, right? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. And so he prayed with them on our front porch and he came in and he's like, I can do anything I want now. So he didn't truly actually believe that. And he doesn't just do whatever he wants. Like he is a good human being, but I just think it's still a funny story anyway. Um, and thinking about again, like all the different religions I've experienced in small amounts, like it does feel like some religions are more focused on, um, like just saying, like, or, and maybe, I know it's not just saying, but it's like, oh, accepting Jesus into your heart, where Catholics are a little bit more, focused on like how you live your life and the good works part of it rather than just being saved by grace. So again, it was like all confusing. And I feel like there's just again, from my experience, religion is a place where depending on the messages you receive when at different phases of life, whether it's when you're young or when you're an adult, can really make you question your worthiness. And I've come to, again, if you've watched my other videos, like I've come to the conclusion through my own exploration that worthiness is really something that you're born with, that you don't have to earn, that you don't have to prove. And, it's like it's not something that can be taken away and it's not something that can be earned. We're all born with it. And that's my belief. Like that is the belief I've come to after years of exploration. We're all inherently worthy. And there's so much of this, and I'm going to talk about this in other videos. Like I'll explain some of this, but there's a really cool concept called the birthrights, which I really think points to the worthiness by being born. And it's divided up into some different things, but I'll share that with you. But it really, to me, kind of fits in with like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and kind of again what all human beings just by existing really deserve to have or need to have. And I believe we all deserve that, no matter race, religion, sexual identity, any of that. So I have come to believe at this stage in my life about myself, about other people, about the world, um, is that we aren't sinners. Like, I think that is such a strange thing because that presupposes that we're all evil and negative. And I don't believe that. I believe human beings, that we're all just human beings and we're having a human experience and trying to live our best lives the best way we know how with the resources and the experiences that we've been given. Um, and again, I know this may hit people and not hit people in a positive way, but I just invite you to think about it that instead of us all being sinners according to especially like a Christianity, like being born sinners, we're all sinners, we all sin, like really focusing on that. I just like to think of us all being inherently worthy and all being humans. And hopefully the goal is that we do as little harm as possible. And when we do harm, whether intentional or not, we try to repair what we can, our relationships, and we continue to try to just do the best we can, live our best lives in the best way we can, and treat others with respect. So yeah, we're just living the human experience, and that's the way it's supposed to be. So thanks for hanging out with me. If you got through that whole thing, I appreciate the opportunity to ramble because that's what I need to do sometimes just to get this is healing for me, to be honest with you. And I hope maybe there's some piece of what I say that either allows you to think, be curious, maybe gain a new perspective, learn something about yourself, or, just if it's something that you even can relate to. Like again, I just hope it's helpful to think about things in that way. And just remember, as I close, you are inherently worthy just because you exist. And it's okay that you're having a human experience where we may make mistakes and we may, again, intentionally or unintentionally harm other people. But we can repair that and we can continue just to live in the best experience possible while we're here on this planet. So have a beautiful day and I'll come back again soon.